G'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. I thought I would comment on a couple of stories bubbling away. First of all, we have been linked to Jack Graham in the most categorical sense possible. This tweet from Ryan Daniels came out like an hour before I started recording this, and he says that Jack Graham is set for a move to West Coast. Now, two things came to mind. First of all, Ryan Daniels is generally on the money and fairly reliable, and someone I think that is quite well connected to the West Coast Eagles, and therefore, more so than, say, some other journalists that I won't name, this one does definitely have me thinking that there could be some legitimacy to it. Second of all, side note, I can't remember a time, even in the last few years, where trade deals are being reported on with such certainty and such finality with a month to go in the season ever before. I cannot remember this ever being the case. I understand that it's a changing landscape and everything like that, but every team in the league right now is still going through their season, let alone, things can change during trade period, let alone between now and then. Nonetheless, let's just take it on face value. Ryan Daniels seems to be pretty confident, and he wouldn't tweet this in this way without being confident, that Jack Graham is likely to end up at the West Coast Eagles through the free agency period this year. So, I'm recording this like a day after I've released my trade hypotheticals scenario where I had us getting Tim English, Liam Baker, and Riley Garcia. And I do remember the Jack Graham story, happening earlier in the year. Then I almost sort of forgot about it, and now it seems to be a thing. I will say as well, I looked up Jack Graham, I searched him on Google and hit the news tab, and 6 days ago he met with Port Adelaide. So it's an interesting set of events here, and that makes me think, well, assuming this is true and that Jack Graham is leaning towards West Coast, it's interesting to note that he is South Australian, and also Port Adelaide, the specific club he's linked to and the one that he met with, is kind of in the window. And therefore you sort of suggest that, okay, he's not choosing to go home and he's choosing to go to a side rooted to the bottom three of the ladder, and that could become bottom two. Why would he be doing that? Well, he must be getting a pretty good offer from West Coast. So we do need to bear that in mind, that whatever free agency contract he is being offered, it's going to trump Port Adelaide's. For where Jack Graham is at the moment, I don't think there are too many Richmond fans that are going to lose sleep over losing him. Now, I don't think he's a bad player, and I think, broadly speaking, kind of fits some of our core aims. What are our core aims at the moment? We want to re-sign the players that have short-term value to us, namely the veterans. So we've signed Yo, we've signed McGovern last year, etc. We want to turn over some dead wood. Absolutely. We want to get access to the draft. So what is good about this Jack Graham potential deal is that he won't cost us anything in terms of draft capital. And, if you've been following this for a while, I've been using that phrase a lot. That's really important to us. So, we're being linked to free agency moves to try and improve the middle 20s part of our age demographic, guys 27 and under. Now, they're starting to pile up a little bit, right? We've been linked to a bunch of players. Like I said, English, Garcia, and Baker were the ones that I tried to get to us in my trade hypothetical. We can't possibly get all of them because we just don't have the list spots. And I'd imagine we want to, take our draft picks to the draft this year and get a good hand. Again, I went through that in the trade hypotheticals video. This to me kind of reads, in my personal opinion, like, if we're serious about Jack Graham, maybe this is a response to Liam Baker's reduced interest in joining us. Is there a chance that he is now leading to Fremantle? We know that he met with Fremantle like a week ago or something like that when he was in Perth. Whenever it was, it might have been longer ago than that. It was reported about a week ago. So it makes me think we might not be getting both. And while I think Liam Baker probably exceeds Jack Graham in terms of the on-field ability and probably worth the money a little bit more, I suppose on the one hand, we don't have to give up a top 20 pick to land Jack Graham, so maybe we can maintain those core aims of getting established players at no cost other than money and prioritizing our access to the draft. Now, interestingly as well, we're linked to a lot of these free agents. I can't fault the club on that. That's what we need to do. We need to improve the middle part of our list. We need to improve the best 22 in a way that doesn't compromise our ability to get the best 18-year-old talent onto our list. Free agency is the glaring way to do that, and I'm glad we're being proactive in this space. I'm also glad we're fishing around guys like Garcia, Jack Carroll, and just seeing what we can prize loose of other clubs, perhaps underappreciated established players at other clubs to try and improve us. That's great, and they'll probably be cheap. So Liam Baker is the odd one out there, and it just makes me think, given we're linked to all these players and almost certainly going to be attacking the draft hard, I just can't help but thinking there's just going to be more to be playing out in terms of us getting rid of players on our list. We talked about the players we might cut from the main list, and a lot of those were obvious, the players out of contract with it and Rotherham, etc. like that. In my video, I pushed Darling into retirement. Gaff will almost certainly retire. It makes me think there's more coming. I don't understand how we can fit all these players into the list, take the requisite amount of draft picks that we want, which I think is probably going to be minimum 5 at this current point in time. Surely we're going to find creative ways to make space on the list as well. So I think there's so much to play out, but that's why I'm here. That's what we're here to cover and talk about each story as it comes up. So on Jack Graham as a player, look, the difference between him and Baker, I think he's okay. He's kind of played as a defensive forward. I had a look and he's not playing much midfield. He spent 39% of time at centre bounce for Richmond. Is there a chance he comes and takes more centre bounces at West Coast? I don't know. Is he going to be a pressure forward? What does that mean for Jamie Cripps? I feel like Jamie Cripps' spot there is the experienced defensive running forward. I feel like we don't have that many spots for a Jack Graham who's probably going to be playing forward of centre. Does he play more on the wing? Last played in round 18, I think it was. I'll just double check that. Last played in round 18, 21 touches and 7 tackles, 5 clearances. Now that's a pretty solid game. If he's producing that sort of output for us, I at least see the value of that. It's just a little bit unclear whose spot in the team is he taking, because outside of Cripps, you're looking at Noah Long, Tyrell Dewar's got to get games, Jack Hutchinson we've just recruited. Did I say Brockman? It's just hard to envisage what exactly that looks like. However, I think it's important to stay calm, I guess is the right word, and analyze the moves as a whole. What kind of mix are we doing? Yeah, this Jack Graham move might look better if we're really aggressive with cutting players and trading players out and getting good draft picks. I'll wait until we see the entire list moves before I really comment on whether or not I think this is a bad move. Again, I don't really see as much value for Graham, but I think, this to me, I think it has to be at the expense of Liam Baker. I'm thinking surely we don't get both. But again, he's a player that's decent, but, unlike Baker, I think Baker could come in and be best 22 for the rest of his career. And I think Jack Graham probably has a couple of years at best at West Coast, and then we're probably going to phase him out. So it's an interesting move. Let me know in the comments what you think. I think this also leads to a little bit of an interesting side story here with Richmond. Now, Richmond, going into this season, obviously need draft picks badly. What they've done is accumulated a lot of third rounders, second rounders, and fourth rounders, and you can see them combining those picks, trading them with clubs who are chasing points for academy players and getting a really good draft hand. Now, in the background, what we're hearing is, first of all, Dusty leaving. There's rumours of them getting 2 first-round picks for Daniel Rioli. That's probably less than a 50-50 at this point. This Shea Bolton story and this Liam Baker story, both of those players leaving could genuinely, if they do leave, result in Richmond getting a whole stack of first-round picks, similar to what GWS and Gold Coast got when they entered the competition. So, how does that affect us? Richmond could potentially hold, 3 or 4 first-round picks this year, and they've also got a whole heap of points later in the draft that they could use. I think if Richmond was smart, they'd hold heaps of their first-round or top 20 picks or whatever they're going to likely end up with, and trade those later picks they have for points into next year's draft, because they can still use that. That's going to be a heavily compromised draft next year as well, with heaps of father, sons, and academy picks. Arguably the most ever compromised draft, they reckon, for next year. So if Richmond trade into the future, how this affects us is that open the door for us to potentially trade with Gold Coast and Adelaide and Brisbane and Carlton this year, who are all trading up for points. Or trading down, I should say. Could this create some sort of opportunity for us? Is something I'm interested to see. There's a lot to play out. This Richmond offseason is going to be a very fascinating case study. I've never seen a team maybe, attract one draft as aggressively as they could potentially, or at least they're in the position to do. They are linked to about 5 established players leaving. I'm thinking I'm going to do a video on True Footy about this because this is fascinating. Before we go, I wanted to touch on a couple of articles by Kane. He didn't write these articles, he's quoted on SEN as saying them. Now, I will preface this by saying I do not hate Kane Corns. I have been critical of some of his ideas, particularly the anti-West Coast ones, because naturally I have a vested interest in West Coast. He throws a lot of shit at West Coast, and look, I get it. We are an embarrassing team right now and have been for a number of years, and that comes with some criticism, so I don't dismiss everything he says. Sometimes he'll say something and I'll be like, yeah, fair enough. But there are sometimes he says things that I just think, okay, this seems a little bit like a personal hatred bubbling through. I'm all for him criticising us week to week and saying, wow, what a shameful performance by the Eagles senior players. They didn't lift this week, and it was embarrassing, because I also feel that way quite often. But there are sometimes I just think he overreaches with his aggression. His personal brand is to be this combative guy, and I think there is a place for that, and I do generally listen to his opinion, even if I do filter out some of the stuff that I think is a little bit whack. And in this video, I want to come up with a couple of articles here that I just think he's gone a little bit whack with. So he's made two separate sets of comments about Jake Waterman and Tom Barrass and their contract negotiations. So let's talk about Barrass first. It's pronounced Barrass. Obviously, he's met with Hawthorn recently and Sam Mitchell. So Kane Cornes had a lot to say about it. So the article points out by saying, in June, Barrass said that he would remain an Eagle unless the rug gets pulled out from under his feet. Well, I do remember him saying this. Cornes said, I was critical of this at the time and I saw straight through it. About a month ago, Tom Barrass said this when he was asked about his future. This is the Barrass quote. He says, it happens every year. It's hardly a story. AFL clubs chasing established key position players. It's just the currency of football. So I wouldn't be reading too much into it. I'm a West Coast Eagles player, and unless the rug gets pulled from under my feet, I'll stay that way. I'm really excited about where we are. Cornes labelled the comments a disgrace. So straight off the bat, I mean, I think if you just throw words around like disgraceful for something like this, like you're just showing your cards a little bit there, mate. Like you're just going too hard over something that is not that big a deal. However, let's hear him out. He basically accuses Barrass of blaming the media. Tom Barrass is the player whose management sought a trade or certainly put the interest from Sydney on the agenda. Barrass was pushing it as far as it's been reported. Then he's asked about it and says, I'm a West Coast player until the rug is pulled from under my feet, and blaming the media for the story about it. Yeah, but how do we know that Barrass was the one that initiated the potential trade to Sydney? We heard about it from the media, so there's a logical flaw in what you're saying there. Barrass is basically saying, don't believe everything you hear that's reported in the media, and Cornes' response is, well, it was reported in the media. Listen to this, it's one of the more disgraceful comments in the media I've heard from Barrass. If he wants to grow up, and if we all want to grow up with where the industry is heading, stop treating us like fools, which is exactly what he has done here. What a disgrace. I mean, talk about just over-exaggerated opinion. And we'll go back to this point here. I'm a West Coast player until the rug is pulled from under my feet. Essentially, he's blaming the media for it. With 4 weeks to go in the season, with 3 years to go on a contract, he's meeting with a rival coach and he's trying to blame the media. It is so important to clarify here that Barrass has met with Hawthorn after he said those comments. The comment was that unless the rug was pulled out from under his feet, he would stay at West Coast. Now, Cornes has obviously missed this, but what has been at least the suggestion in the media is that it's West Coast saying, hey, we're probably not willing to pay you as much as we verbally agreed to under that different management. Now we think the best thing is potentially a trade. That's kind of where this story is coming from. This is not necessarily Barrass wanting to leave. It's him wanting to get paid as much as he thinks he's worth, or he's trying to maximize what he's trying to make. West Coast is not quite willing to come to the party, so the situation has changed, and therefore he's gone to meet Hawthorn. It is important that that happened after he made those comments. So I think he needs to give Barrass a break here. Barrass probably does want to stay at West Coast. It's West Coast who is less willing to commit on big money, and you can understand that for where we're at. But anyway, it's just the venom with which Cornes speaks that he just loses me. It's like, okay, you can have an opinion. Just when you use comments like disgraceful, I always feel like when you let emotion dictate your opinion too much, this is where you lose credibility. Now, Cornes has also had a massive crack at Jake Waterman. So this is an article about Jake Waterman being pursued by Geelong and Waterman wanting a pay rise at West Coast and trying to leverage that, okay? Very normal stuff. It says, with Waterman's current deal reportedly less than $500,000 a season, the report says he wants to cash in on his good form and renegotiate his current deal at West Coast. Cornes couldn't believe that Waterman wanted to renegotiate a deal that he only recently signed, despite the Geelong interest looming. He says Waterman wants to cash in on his career best form by renegotiating the contract he signed last year. Why have we all of a sudden got players who play 10 good games and they go, you know what, that contract I signed only 6 months ago, I want that ripped up because I'm in really good form and I want you to pay me this. Okay, so some important clarity here, first of all. Waterman's obviously signed a bit of a reduced deal because there were question marks on his health. Remember, he signed really late last year and he had no negotiating power in that instance, and the club threw him a lifeline, backed him in, paid him probably a little bit unders, but naturally a lot of uncertainty about the Waterman situation. This is also disingenuous from Cornes, saying he's basically implying that Waterman's saying, I want that contract ripped up because I'm in really good form. He's just projecting quotes onto Waterman that make him seem like a dickhead. But players leveraging their career best form for contract increases is extremely normal. He's implying that it's selfish for Waterman, who is on a modest deal, who has been our best player this year, all Australian quality, to try and leverage that to get more money. Are you serious, Kane Cornes? Like, every single player in the league would do that. Every single player in the league would also leverage a rival's massive contract offer. Like, I imagine Geelong's offering him a decent amount of money, every single player in the league would leverage that to try and get a pay increase at his current club. So singling out Jake Waterman as some sort of, I don't know, selfish, conceited, delusional douche, that's what he's making him sound like. This is where it comes back to, like, Kane Cornes is just firing at will at any little opportunity at West Coast. Now, again, I don't want to sound like a whingy Eagles fan because, you know, Cornes throws a lot of shit at us. Like I said, I will listen to everything he says. I do think generally he's a good analyst, but I feel like it's getting to the point where every single West Coast related thing, he cannot offer a measured opinion. And that manifests not with his week-to-week commentary, which I think is fine and justified, but when he leaps on little stories like this, calling Tom Barrass a disgrace, going hard at Jake Waterman for trying to leverage career best form and an opposition contract offer, I mean, I think he needs to get a grip a bit. Even this little comment here, you signed the contract, you were happy to sign the contract 6 months ago. Yeah, when his own personal negotiating power was at rock bottom with his illness. You've played 16 great games. We've loved every minute of Jake Waterman this season, but now he wants that deal ripped up or he's threatening to walk or join Melbourne or Geelong. You are projecting that on Jake Waterman. That is not necessarily what is happening here, and this is disingenuous. It's dishonest. You know, my thoughts on Kane Cornes in general, like, I stick away from, like, the round so far or whatever other shows he's on where he's being, you know, a bit of a shock jock, whatever, that's fine. I do find that when you watch him on SEN Sports, and that's their YouTube channel, and he does long format conversation, I find him a lot more tolerable. Like, he's a good footy analyst. I don't agree with everything he says, he's fine. But this sort of thing is exactly the sort of behavior that leads people to think he only says things to generate clicks, and he's doing his job, but I just think I'm gonna criticize things that I think are dumb as shit. Anyway, guys, let me know in the comments what you think of everything. It was a pretty diverse video. The Eagles play later today, taking on the Gold Coast Suns, and you will see me live on the True Footy YouTube channel if you want to come say hello. So for now, I'll say goodbye. Up the Eagles.